Your half nut. Half nut engages two halves of a nut. That's why it's a half nut lever. Engages two halves of a nut that grab onto your lead screw for doing threading work. You have it geared so that it goes at the right speed for the thread that you want to make. When you're making multiple passes, you want to know how to be able to engage it at the right spot. So you have a threading dial, and that tells you where you're at. But the real thing that's, you get confused, different brands have different markings, even threads, odd threads. There's some rules and thoughts that you can do to always check yourself. First off, how many threads is your lead screw? Some of them are 2, some are 6, some are 4. 4 is the most common on a normal industrial manual lathe. If you have 4 threads per inch, then the only places that you can engage it, looking at this, is going to be every 1/4 of an inch. And when we go back to the 2 threads per inch, like our bigger lathe over here has 2 threads per inch, little lathes, we don't have any in here that have the 6 threads per inch. But one of the things that is a really common thread size is 12 threads per inch. And the reason why, and a lot of machinists love 12 threads per inch, because on any of these machines, 12 threads per inch, we can engage it anywhere. We don't even have to look at that. You can just put it in, because 12 threads per inch, you're always going to line up with the proper place on a thread every 1/4 of an inch if it's 12 threads. If it's every half a thread is then at a 1/2 inch mark, so that's going to also line up with 12. 1/6 of an inch on a 6 threads per inch lead screw. So 12s work with all of these different machines. Now, when we get to looking at the threading dial, one of the things they say is if you don't know, always leave it on 1. You know, just always go back to the same number, or use always 8 or whatever. And that's not a bad rule. But you still need to check it and think about it, because if you're cutting metric threads, or if you're cutting threads that are like a 1/8, 5 1/8 of a thread per inch, not 5 it would be 1 1/8. Well, 1 1/8 of an inch per thread, that doesn't mean that you can always come back and catch that thread at the same place. Sometimes you have to actually run the machine backwards and just leave your half nut engaged. That's what you do on a US machine when you're cutting metric threads, is you actually run the machine backwards to keep the right alignment so that it works with the metrics. But the big thing here is, if we look at this, that's at a 1/4 inch. And we can even set our digital up here at 0. And we will see that when we engage it next, it's about a 1/4 of an inch. And if we look over here, we were at 1. Now we're at the next mark. On this lathe here, every one of these marks is a 1/4 of an inch. So we can stop and think about what threads have a common denominator with the number of 1/4 inches of threads. It's not magic or anything weird. It's just counting how many threads we've gone by. This one counts essentially 16 positions, because it has 8 with a half. So counting 16 positions, that means that this is keeping track of 4 inches of travel, if I'm correct on that. So if we start out at our 1, and we go back to 1, it's 4 inches. So different lathes, like I say, are a little different on different dials. And check yourself. Check and make a cut in space before you start cutting down your part. Make sure that you're doing what is going to give you the same repeat. But just take some of the mystery out of it, is the fact that you can only engage it every 1/4 inch, and that this is just counting the positions. If it was a 6 threads per inch, you could only engage it every 1/6 of an inch, and your marks here are going to be calibrated for 1/6 of an inch, whether they have them double marks or, you know, this on another lathe where this one here has 8 marks with half marks, you might find another lathe that has 16 full marks. There's kind of standard, but not always, because the majority of the lathes I've been around actually had half and quarter marks. And I got to where I just gave up on trying to learn specific lathes unless it's one that I'm using